to actually switch between, this is a very straightforward rockin line, to pivot from, let's say, the 12 to the 15, then going back down to the 14 and the 12, which is simply the notes of E, G and F sharp. To give a real quack in the wah-wah is I'm going to put a low scoop and that unison bend, and then slide off and quack on that low E, so it should sound a bit like this. Once again, gives it a real attitude to it. When we're recording this, I've got a Steve Jones comparison there. Depending which way you can take that. Slipping into a very, very typical kind of slash line. What I'm doing there is using an oblique bend, which is where I take a fixed position, let's say this time on the 15th fret on the B, and then bending the G string a full tone from the 14, so it should sound like the 16. And I'm actually cracking the lick in syncopated 16, so it gives it a real bouncy feel. And once again, keeping a steady scoop on that wah-wah. You don't always want to quack on it. It's one of the most natural things to do when you get a wah-wah for the first time, is just simply quack quack, where you're going bass, treble, bass, treble. For this one, to get a real bit of attitude out of it, you want to keep, because you're keeping a real steady syncopated motion of the 16ths there. If you keep a steady scoop on your wah-wah, there's a little bit of control to your playing and really emphasises tension and attitude to your playing. Talk about that repertoire action. I take probably closest to somewhere between a 16th note triplet to 32nd notes, going across, let's say, 15th fret, and then putting a little bit of legato, and then taking the same shape symmetrically and going from the G across there. Now this would probably more fit a hybrid scale, which is kind of a combination of the blues scale with a few extra intervals thrown in, adding my sixth, and then with the blues scale, adding the tritone in. And the actual flutter, the actual 16th flutter I'm putting there, is going across the 12 and the 14, and the trill is really just going across the note on the 15 on the B string, which would be the note D, and then the 15th fret across the G string, which would be a note of B flat. So it's only on the D and the B flat that you're having to go across there. And once again, putting the scoop on a wah-wah. To take that out, you get a slightly more 80s shred feel to it. Putting the wah-wah in just takes off that that little bit of hair rock to it, really, and just makes it a little bit more Guns N' Roses-esque, and guitarists that say like Joe Perry from Aerosmith, who was a big influence on Slash, keeping that real 70s vibe to it. It's quite cool. And little hybrid lick once again at the end, kind of taking a very similar shape, but put it into the lower octave. Just taking that set pattern, which is basically going across symmetrically, 3rd fret, the 2nd fret, open position. And what I do is just keep, once again, rapid action of 16th note triplet. Usually hit an open G, 5 power chord there, which is going to cross simply open D and G. Sometimes I'll just quack on the wah-wah. Sometimes I'll put a maybe some open natural harmonics across set positions, 12th fret to get your octave, And then to get your perfect intervals, your 4th and your 5th, going across, let's say 5th fret and 7th fret. And then after that, you're back into your riff. Now, a couple of tips actually to get into the solo. Because it's going to require a heavy amount of legato on your fretting hand, I really do highly recommend that you actually warm up. Now, here are a couple of key warm-ups that you can actually do with this particular tune. Now, the BPM, I've actually set on this one, it's around about 130 BPM. If you're up to it, please practice on the BPM. Now, you probably find, hang on, I'm practicing on at the BPM, but I haven't even really got to speed. How do I do that? What you can do is actually drop the subdivision. Now, the subdivision is the actual note length. Now, the actual passages we've been doing, or will be doing, are going to be going through motions within 16th and then going into 16th note triplet. The next sub lower to that, with a longer duration, would be an 8th note motion. So rather than actually chopping through a motion that would go, let's say being a 16th note movement, you could actually step through, which would be an 8th note motion. Exactly the same movement for the hand, but it's a really good way of developing muscle memory, but still keeping with the actual key groove that's being used in the original recording. So going from 16ths, now that's a really good pattern you can do there as well, is actually juxtapositioning between the 16th note and the 8th note, because it gives your hand a little sprint and a jog, so that your stamina levels will build up, and as you get stronger and as your muscle memory develops, you can actually keep the licks more consistent. You can even drop down into chord note motion, so you get an exercise a little bit like this, taking the set patterns and stepping through quarters and eighths and into 16ths. And also that can work as well for the triplet motion as well. Just take in mind that the actual counting is going to be 3 notes per beat. A really good idea for actually pitching your bends acutely is to once take that position at 15th fret. If you're doing a full tone bend, your note should sound like the pitch from the 17th fret, which would be a full tone up from that particular note. Is then trying to achieve that pitch. So it sounds something like. And if you can do that, that's a really, really good way of doing it. Also, because the actual line is using unison bends, you've actually got a fixed note on the top here anyway, so your goal is to get those 2 notes to marry up. Now, if you've got that screaming guitar effect, it's not quite there, but it's very, very close. Very, very a la Sepultura, and for more modern bands, Dillinger Escape Plan and so forth. Use a lot of that stuff all the time. Very, very cool in that context, but what we want to make sure we do is achieve that note right at the end. Okay, so that little bit of tension towards the end sounds really, really cool, but you've got to make sure you get there in the end, otherwise you're going to have some very, very happy punters at the end listening to it. So make sure you can get that note.